and welcome to Arts and Entertainment. I'm Deborah Gilbert, your host, and thanks so much for being here today. I greatly appreciate your time. Well, I have a wonderful, terrific show for you today. I absolutely think that you're going to love my guest. Her name is Julie Fitzpatrick. She's an actress, a writer, and an acting coach that's based in Guilford, Connecticut. And Julie, so nice to have you here today. Thanks so much for coming.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm so glad I found you.
Me too.
Well, as we've talked about, the audience and the viewer, they're important. So why don't you take us back? Tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah. First of all, I do want to tell you, I said this to you beforehand, but I really am enjoying your program. I encourage everyone who's watching to explore Arts and Entertainment with Deborah Gilbert. You'll learn so much about Connecticut and the artists here. So it's been a real pleasure for me to explore your program and get to know all the creativity that's right around our wonderful towns here. So it's very exciting. I grew up in Guilford. I went through the Guilford public school system, which I thought was really wonderful. I grew up in a large Irish family, and we were used to getting up and performing, doing pieces, singing. And so starting really in kindergarten, my dad would play the piano, I would be singing. In second grade, I did my first play, the world famous Grammar Gulch. You may know it. It's a piece about the beauty of grammar. But I loved being up there and enjoyed the whole experience. Fifth grade musicals, eighth grade musicals. And then it was really in high school that I got bitten by the bug, I guess you would say. I had the pleasure of working with Pat Sowney, whom I've suggested to you, and I hope you get a chance to meet. She's a director who is along the Connecticut shoreline, now in Old Saybrook. And she actually directed the Drama Works theater program show that you just interviewed Ed Wilhelms. So that first show, Ages of the Moon, was Pat. Pat taught me really the fundamentals about what it is to be an actor, really a professional actor. We were a high school theater group, but her standards were so high. I learned from Pat everything that I used in professional theater and continue to use, from personal conduct in dressing rooms to how to memorize your lines, to knowing the names of the technicians who are working the shows for you, to really putting your best foot forward in any show that you're in. So it was really with Pat's training that I fell in love with wanting more training. I started to do conservatory work shortly thereafter. I went to Boston University Theater Institute for a summer program, which was fantastic. I did National Theater Institute here at the Eugene O'Neill Center. Went to Stratford-upon-Avon and walked where the Bard was born. Saw a bunch of British theater in London, and knew I wanted more training, but was really encouraged to get a liberal arts degree. So I went to UPenn undergrad, did some neat theater there. It's a small but burgeoning theater arts department. And then I auditioned for MFA programs, had a really sort of serendipitous turn and ended up in San Francisco at the American Conservatory Theater. So that's a 3-year sort of round-the-clock conservatory program. So we were doing everything from Shakespeare to Chekhov to imaginal movement. And I really continued to be taken by theater and what it was to be a part of a theater bubble. So when I then, upon graduation, moved to New York City in 2002, I found another bubble and a bunch of them, but really landed at Ensemble Studio Theater, which is on the west side of the city, pretty far west. You'll basically fall into the Hudson River as you walk to find the theater. And you climb up a few floors, and there you are in this amazing black box theater space where there are writers, directors, and actors making theater. And I learned to be very nimble. I learned to memorize quickly and make a piece and make changes, and really started to understand the craft as theater was being made in a whole new way there. Did some regional work, started to write. I write poetry. I also wrote a solo show about a friend of mine who had passed called Riddle Like Love with a Side of Ketchup. Did that a little bit around Vermont, New York. And then I did Pittsburgh Public. So I did a bunch of theater around, but I was mostly based in New York City. In 2012, I had my little boy, beautiful, beautiful Fitz, and he is now 9. His father and I parted a few years after he was born, and I really had to figure out what now. And I didn't think what now meant continuing to live in New York City. So I found my footing again, sort of stepping back from creativity, really, and I joined my father's business, which is in Woodbridge, Crest Lincoln of Woodbridge. You're interested in a new or pre-owned vehicle, it's a great spot. And as I landed and sort of healed and Fitz got settled in Guilford, back with family, I started to get back in touch with my creative juices. And so I have been writing, I have been doing some acting coaching, I have been acting again in these intervening times. And that brings us to now, where I'm working on this piece for the Guilford Performing Arts Festival, which will be in September. I'm wearing the t-shirt of the show. It's called All the World's a Stage, a Guilford Pandemic Love Story. And it's really about, it's a spoken word piece about Guilfordites' collective experiences of the pandemic and where love is in their lives. So I'll tell you more about that when you ask.
Well, I always love to ask this question to begin with. Did you realize when you were young that performing theater, the entertainment industry was going to be your path? It sounds as if it was.
I did, Deborah. I knew that transformation and slipping out of Julie and into other personas was a freedom that really called to me. I definitely knew that much. I think I'm continuing to understand what it is to pursue life as an artist or life as an actor, a creative being, when things like a pandemic come in, or when you don't get cast, or when, figuring out over these past 16, 17 years of being out of school, is figuring out, okay, how do I continue to be a creative being and work when the circumstances aren't always tied up in a bow like they often are if you're cast in a show within school, right? So learning to be an artist in the midst of a world in which there are very practical demands on our time, and negotiating real life in the midst of your passion and hopefully tying them together is now where I am. But I think very early on I knew that there was something thrilling about performing and transforming and getting into a costume or putting on an accent or diving into this world that you can create with just a couple of people in a space together. I think that has always bewitched me.
Was it, or is it, for the viewer that is thinking about pursuing an acting career, is pursuing an acting career, is it hard to be an actor? Did you find it difficult at all?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, we are all, as much as we share in this human condition, right, as similar as we all are, the ways in which we handle each day and every given part of within it are pretty idiosyncratic and built to Deborah and Julie and Chris and Christy, who are here in the studio, right? So we all have our different makeup. So I think as an actor, I may have different struggles than you do with it. I always found once I had the show, once I had the work, I could fly, because I know my technique. I know what my memorization process looks like. I know what my focus process looks like. I know the stages I go through: horrible, awful, exciting, thrilling, scary. I know those pieces, and I can help myself through them. The things that were hard for me was the agent dance and the audition dance, and staying grounded in my own skin, and true to my instrument in the midst of all that's going on outside. Which I would imagine is pretty common for actors, but we all have our own special sauce of neurosis within that. But I think that was the hardest part for me. I would say stringing together show to show. What happens in between those two pearls, and how do I continue to have a strong sense of self-worth? How do I continue to put together meaningful days and a meaningful life and a grounded experience in the midst of job to job to job transition?
Now, you are back into a creative mode.
Yes.
Why don't we talk about what's happened since you've come back into things? Tell us about the Guilford Arts Festival.
Yep. The Guilford Performing Arts Festival, exactly.
Performing Arts, yes.
Yes, so the Guilford Performing Arts Festival is really modeled after the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So if anyone has been there, you know that basically Edinburgh is covered with venues and shows, and you find them in little nooks and crannies all over the city. in 2019, when I was last in this festival, Guilford was like that. You know, there was a dance studio that was hosting a show, the church, this church, another spot, the Guilford High School Performance Space, all were holding different shows. Because of the pandemic, we have a scaled down version of, my watch was talking to me, not something I anticipated. You know, we have a scaled down version because of the pandemic now of what this festival will look like. So this festival is showcasing the grant winners. So there were various disciplines, 6 disciplines, and people could apply to win a grant in one of these disciplines. One of them was spoken word. I applied for a grant in the spoken word category. So through the course of the September 25th and 26th in Guilford, you'll see all 6 winners' shows performed. Mine is at 12 noon on the 25th in the Guilford Green. I believe all of the pieces are right there on the Guilford Green. But this piece really came to me in the midst of what we were talking about before the show, the real shutdown period and what is happening to creativity during this time. I found myself wondering, you know, what's happening? You know, everyone had gone into their respective homes. There wasn't a sense of community as much as there was fear. And my son was out of school. My husband's business was deemed essential, so he was at work. But we were really in a hunkered down, isolated bubble. And I found myself wondering what is tethering people through this time to a sense of groundedness in their lives. I found myself reading Shakespeare. And I thought, wow, it's the things that we love. It's the things that take us out of the here and now and the tough stuff that maybe are life rafts. What if I could interview people about what their life rafts were during this time and maybe string those pieces together? And maybe that could be a piece. So I wrote that up in a much more eloquent way, and I applied with that premise. And I won the piece. So I'm just so honored and thrilled. There are 5 women voices who are going to be basically telling the stories of the town. Just a wonderful, diverse group of women. And then we're going to have a sign language interpreter. Hopefully we will have a deaf audience to see the show. Very important to me, having grown up with a deaf best friend who was a huge proponent of access for the deaf to see theater, to hear theater, to watch movies. So I want to make sure that anyone, Elizabeth's in heaven now, but anyone who is deaf can hear the piece through sign. And I play the poet narrator, so I take us through the story, and hopefully you'll have a wonderful time. I hope you can come.
The pandemic, you mentioned it, and of course I always ask about it. How has it affected the entertainment industry? How has it affected all the people that you taught? You said you interviewed about 70 people. How has it overall affected the people this past year and a half?
Well, I would say there was a real mix of responses. Some people seemed to flourish with the independence and the quiet, and then other people were really disoriented by it. A sense of dislocation, a sense of what do I do now, a real sense of missing each other. I heard so often, I just want to hug. I just want to hug my mother. I just want to hug someone. I want, you know, grandparents who couldn't have their grandchildren on their laps, right? Who couldn't come closer than out the window or waving. I heard boredom. I heard, what do I do now? I'm eating all day long. I heard newfound passions. One mother saying, you know, my kids said, you've got to learn to ride a bike, and we're doing it now. So she suddenly rides a bike. One of the women who's in the piece, Stephanie Little Brown, is a passionate dancer and hoop dancer. So she hooped it out, and she's doing some hoop dancing in the piece. You know, so I heard very different things from everyone. Some people felt their marriages blossomed with the togetherness. My parents have been together almost 60 years, and my father, who works 6 days a week still at an age I won't share in case he watches and would prefer I don't, you know, suddenly they had this time together in a way that they hadn't, and there was a closeness that came together, a further closeness. he says at one point, I love her now more through all of this than I did before. And it's almost like it grew for them. Other people, I heard from someone who was really deliberating about whether or not to stay in this marriage. And the pandemic, the togetherness, caused a kind of rupture between her and her becoming former husband. So, and then other people who had this opportunity together as a family unit who got in an RV and saw a rodeo across country. So I think it really amazed me, the spread of experiences, and also the fact that right now, here we are, right? We're sitting in 2021. It's July. We're at a distance from one another, but we're not terrified. We are vaccinated. We have a feeling of some normalcy, though there is still quite a reason to be concerned. I think we're in a tenuous time. This festival is going to be live. We will be al fresco, thank God. But it's things are still slowly but surely coming back. Theater we have now gone to the wonderful Legacy Theater. We've gone to Drama Works. We're seeing things here and there a little bit, but it feels wonderful and kind of shocking to be suddenly in a group with an audience again. And I'm sure you're finding that. You were saying you haven't done very many interviews back in person, right?
Right.
So it's an interesting time. It really is.
Well, let's hold that thought. We're going to take a break right now. I'm Deborah Gilbert. We'll be right back.
Honey, what I think you need is a socket wrench.
I played JV basketball.
I'm sorry. I don't think it looks right.
This is good, and it's all good, baby.
Is it really all good?
If you love me enough to routinely test your handyman skills, not to mention the strength of your marriage, then of course you'll visit nhtsa.gov/therightseat to make sure I'm in the right car seat.
I'm gonna call my dad.
Community TV, your neighborhood TV.
Publicly funded and a reliable partner for cable companies nationwide. It provides transparent coverage of local and state government, education, and public programming.
A digital town green that can be watched anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Watch us on today's high-tech distribution methods.
Community TV in Connecticut.
Local,
unfiltered,
reliable, and yours.
And welcome back to Arts and Entertainment. I'm Deborah Gilbert, your host, and again, thanks so much for being here today. Well, we continue to talk with Julie Fitzgerald, an actress and a writer and an acting coach based in Guilford, Connecticut. And Julie, thank you again for being here.
My pleasure. Julie Fitzpatrick, just for clarity's sake.
Did
but I
say
have
something
cousins
wrong?
who are Fitzgerald, so I like
goodness.
that as well. That's great.
I'm so sorry, everybody. My fault.
No.
My fault.
I get it a lot, actually. I don't mind it at all.
What I don't want to forget is the website. I loved it, and I was on it
thank you.
again today.
Thank you.
See, the quotes about your performance, they just kept on rolling on and on and on and on and on. Tell us about the website. What will the viewer find when they go there?
So juliefitzpatrick.com is my website, and I think you'll find a little bit of inspiration, hopefully, a little bit of story about what I've worked on. Maybe it'll get your wheels turning on creative pursuits for you. I try to keep it updated with fresh pictures. I have some new pictures on there, new information about All the World's a Stage, a Guilford Pandemic love story, so the festival. So the website is both, it's functional in that you can see, all right, when is that happening and what's she up to? And then also just, maybe it's a nice thing to explore and get your own juices flowing. I think that's part of why theater and creativity and arts are so fundamental to me and to our collective beings, is that we share on and are inspired by one another, right? So when I see your program and I watch other artists talk about their work, then I'm inspired to do something with that, and my life is enhanced. So my hope is that you'll visit the site, and maybe there are some beautiful quotes on there, a Willa Cather quote that has actually snuck its way into this piece, although most of the quotes are Shakespeare. Maybe it's a quote that will inspire you about being dissolved into something complete and great. So it's hopefully a place to spurn your own creativity as well.
Now, you had mentioned something coming up in October. Do you have things happening past September?
I do. So October 8th, I am going to be performing 77 U-Turn. 77 U-Turn is a solo show that I wrote in 2017-18, as I was resettling back in Guilford. I had a tour of my childhood home, and it floored me. I hadn't been back there in many years. My folks have since moved to another house in Guilford. And my brother really, I don't know the right way to put it, but he really dissolved into mental illness when I was 9, and it happened in that house. And walking through the house, it was like every room had a different memory for me. And I found myself just writing and writing and writing afterwards, and my now husband, Pete, really said, you know, keep going, get this out. And I found myself writing a piece, and I applied with that piece for this festival in 2019. So that piece has had a further life. 77 U-Turn I have done both at the Guilford Festival 2 years ago, then at Quinnipiac University, and then at the Columbia School of Social Work for grad students. And then right as the pandemic was hitting, I was set to do it for NAMI Shoreline, National Association of Mental Illness, Shoreline, and Pilgrim Fellowship, a group at First Church in Guilford, to do an event about mental illness awareness, and hopefully to speak to the siblings of or family members of people who have really broken apart due to mental illness. And Keely Baisden-Knudsen, the marvelous artistic director at Legacy, directed that piece, and she's going to direct it again in October at Madison Arts Barn. Robin Glaskin, the head of Madison Arts Barn, who's just a fantastic woman and producer and visionary, connected me with you, Deborah, which was great. But she's kind enough to host and support this piece, and hopefully we will have youth and family and folks who are wanting to see a piece that's not all in the doldrums, it's not all blues, but it's got a fair amount of that. But hopefully it will stir people to identify with the aches in their own lives, and perhaps if there are people who have siblings who have suffered from depression, bipolar, self-harm, that they don't feel so alone. There's going to be a talk back after that piece on October 8th. There will also be a talk back after each of the performances in the Guilford Performing Arts Festival. So the communities who come will be able to listen, see, participate, ask questions of the people involved in the creations of the pieces, and hopefully there will be resources on hand, particularly at the event in October, if you need some help or you know someone who needs some help, which is very, very important to me.
Advice to the viewer, which I always ask, as I had told you before, and I've already asked you already, to be somebody like you, the playwright, the actress, the writer, so on, doing these shows. It sounds as if you have so many things that you've worked so hard to accomplish, and you're accomplishing them. How does somebody get started to be able to do that show, or to be able to write this or perform? Do they go to school? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's one that could be answered so many ways, Deborah. I think, the most important thing is to go inside and listen to that part of you that just knows, the gut voice. And if that gut voice says, I need to paint a picture, or I need to move through this experience I'm going through by singing a song, or I need to write a poem. Been lucky enough to be a part of the Guilford Poets Guild just this spring, and it's been thrilling, and listening to so much great poetry around that room. Or maybe it's to act and audition and perform and be in shows. Whatever that ache is to perform, or that joy, that, oh, I gotta do that thing. I would say listen to that more loudly than you listen to the, oh, you can't possibly, you have no, come on. I think we all have a certain inner critic voice as well. And, get the people in your life around you who can say, let me listen to that draft. Why don't you read it to me? Pete is an amazing listener. He'll say, Julie, let me hear that poem, or I want to hear that, or what do you think about this? Or, I'm in a couple of writers groups, they'll hear it and say, geez, how about this line? Or let's switch that around. Or great, go with it. So surround yourself. Find people who, send out a note. Hey, are you interested in being a part of a writers group? Or can you come look at my artwork? I've just painted this. Put yourself out there in little ways, I would say, Deborah, is a great way to begin. And then start to trust that there's only one of us. There's only one Deborah Gilbert. There's only one Julie. There's only one Chris and Christy and all the people in this Water's Edge complex, and then wider and wider out. One little Fitz. So let whatever it is that vibrates in you keep going, and trust that there are people who will help you along your way, I think. And take the risk. It's not easy. These are great experiments we're doing here, right? This festival coming up, one hopes, one hopes with all my heart that it all comes together, but we're all a bit on a tightrope. So I would say start to take little steps to do your work. If that means going to school, then go to school. If that feels like a calling that's going to help you with building a technique around that. Set a timer. I'm going to work on this for 10 minutes. I'm going to work on this for 30 minutes. I'm going to get my draft done by Wednesday. Honor yourself with those deadlines. I think that has been a great source of strength for me. But most of all, good luck to each person who wants to create. I think that's beautiful, and look forward to seeing whatever comes out.
Well, we've run out of time. I want to thank you so very much for being here today. It's been very special.
Yeah,
really
so sweet to
appreciate
meet you.
it.
Really, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And for my viewers that are out there that would like to work on a talk show, I'd love to have you as a volunteer. So please email me at artsandentertainment@mail.com, and the email address is up there. I'd love to have you come work on the show. I'm looking for some terrific people to be a part of this. So if you're interested, please email me. I'm Deborah Gilbert. You've been tuned in to Arts and Entertainment. Hope you have a terrific day today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time.